Waiver gems and trade block plays. Win today and plan for days. Waiver gems and trade block plays. Win today and plan for days. Waiver gems and trade block plays. Win today and plan for days.
Win your league, stack that bread, or start a boom and lose instead. Sunday Surefire, let's go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Sunday Surefire podcast. I'm your host, the Commish. Joining me tonight is my co-host, my main man, Aaron Downtown Brown.
Hey.
What's going on, Aaron?
Hey, man. Yeah, sorry that I was just taking a guess of when that intro music was stopping, but still pretty pumped over what we have in store for us tonight. Ready to talk some football before the NFL draft.
Hell yeah, brother. Always a good time to be talking some football. Usually this time of year, we're talking, rookies, where we think the high-profile rookies are going to land, who our favorite sleepers are, maybe some like hot takes around the draft, what's going to unfold, if there's any crazy trades that are going to be coming down the pike. And we'll get to that in the next couple of weeks. But we did want to sort of pivot back towards the veteran pool of players. And in Dynasty, kind of just talk about some guys that you should be buying before the NFL draft comes around. So that's more or less what we're going to be doing. We're going to be talking about 5 players that you can target in your Dynasty leagues before the NFL draft comes up. So while doing this, we're going to be we're referencing the Fantasy Pros Dynasty rankings. So feel free to follow those along the way. There's no quarterbacks discussed tonight, so you can use whatever set of rankings you like. We're going to be referencing the 1 QB rankings, but if you want to check out Superflex rankings, that's fine. Feel free to do so. And so we'll give you the ranking, and then we'll talk about essentially why we think that they're good buys. And usually to start the show, I throw it off to Ethan or Aaron Downtown Brown, but I'm gonna start this one out here for us, guys. My number one buy this offseason is Devonta Smith, who's currently ranked WR 26 per Fantasy Pros. Gave us a full PPR finish of WR 20 a season ago. And look, Smith is one of those guys that I've been kind of hesitant to buy over the last handful of seasons, just kind of based on how their team's been structured, where he is in the pecking order, and where he's been ranked. I mean, he's been ranked higher than this pretty steadily over the last handful of seasons. But now that he's just outside the top 24 receivers, I'm willing to take a shot. And a big factor in that has to do with a move the Eagles haven't quite made yet. And that, of course, being the A.J. Brown trade. That's looming. It's seeming more and more likely he will not be on this roster come week 1. It's been pretty heavily reported. The reason he's still there is because the Eagles have been hesitant to deal him due to the $40 million cap hit that's kind of hanging over their heads in that situation. But as we know, if they wait until June 1st to go ahead and make a trade, that cap hit drops to a much more reasonable $16 million. So, like I said, I'm pretty confident he's going to be out the door. He may even be coming to my New England Patriots, which, the number one wide receiver is something the Patriots have been looking for a handful of years. But I think that could be he could be a big benefactor in Devonta Smith, that is, if Brown moves on. I mean, if we know about A.J. Brown, he averaged just over 8 targets per game last season, which comes out to 136 targets over a 17-game season that are going to be leaving this offense if Brown does indeed depart. And the other notable pass catcher on this team, Dallas Goedert, he did end up re-signing, but it was kind of like a 2 to 3 week back and forth saga of like drawn out. It's kind of like, oh, well, is there anyone better? No. All right, well, I guess we'll hammer out a 1-year deal and bring him back. They were not in a rush to bring Goddard back, despite the fact he himself was coming off a career season from a fantasy standpoint, all those short touchdowns that he caught. So he's going to be in the mix too. But I mean, I just look at it and say, like, Goddard's not a guy you can run your whole offense through. And even if Philly elects to fill the A.J. Brown void on night 1 of the NFL draft, I mean, Smith's still going to lead this team in targets, guys. It's not as if, and even if he's not cut out to be an alpha, like say worst case scenario, right? Like he becomes the number 1 receiver, he gets all this run, and he doesn't necessarily fully live up to a full alpha production. There's no reason to think he can't replicate the WR19 to WR27 range that he's finished in PPR leagues over the last 3 seasons. So I think worst case, you're buying him for what he's been, which is a usable asset in fantasy, particularly if you play in leagues that have multiple flex spots, which most dynasty leagues do. And I think the upside you're getting is a lot higher. I mean, heck, even in Brown's first year with the Eagles, we saw him finish as WR9 overall on a points per game basis. And I just think that upside is still there with Devonta Smith. He might not finish WR1 overall, but I think he's a really good buy candidate, especially if he's going to be going at WR26 dynasty receiver prices.
Yeah, I love this call out. I know when we were chatting before going live tonight. I was pretty jealous of this selection. I love this call, especially if they do end up trading AJ Brown. But I think Devontae Smith is pretty safe in either scenario, right? I think on a per game basis, Devontae Smith has always been like one PPR point away from AJ Brown anyway. Throughout the years on a basis. So even if they do keep him on the team, he's always been solid wide receiver two for your fantasy team. But yeah, if you're get him right now at this point in time, I think this is why I like this episode for tonight, because in dynasty leagues, the timing of your trades are so important, because the point where you're targeting players, they become much more expensive, right? So if you try to trade for Devontae Smith after an AJ Brown trade, they're gonna ask a lot more. So I definitely love this call out, and I do think he can end up being, the alpha if that does happen. I do feel they got, him and Hurts have a little bit more chemistry than AJ Brown. AJ Brown kind of just goes up and gets it, but I do feel that watching Eagles games that him and Hurts are on the same page. So I do think he could take over that role. Obviously, his size is something that's always been talked about, but um, hasn't really ever gotten in his way in his career. So I definitely love this call out. At a current rank of Dynasty 26, I think it's a great shot to take going for Smith for sure.
Yeah, the things holding him back are AJ Brown was there and he was the number one receiver, and the fact that they were such a run heavy offense over the last handful of seasons. And I think they're still going to continue to run the ball. I mean, you have Saquon Barkley and you have Jalen Hurts, who's a capable runner as a quarterback. That's going to be a big part of what they do. But I mean, if you just drop the 130 some odd targets AJ Brown sees out of the offense, and a lot of those are going to slide to Devonta Smith. I mean, I just think that he's in store for a lot more volume. And as we know in fantasy, that's what we're chasing. Volume is king. And I think we see Smith have a career year in 2026. So if there's any meat on the bone left to go ahead and maybe get a little bit of a discount now, I would do it before that trade goes down in early June for sure. But look, tell me what you got here. Who are you buying low on at this point in the offseason?
Yeah, I'm gonna stay on the wide receiver market, and it's not really. I mean, this is actually almost after a post trade move, right? But I'm gonna talk about Luther Burden, right? For a couple reasons. As I mentioned, timing this one, maybe a little bit later after the DJ Moore trade, but I think he's in a great position. If you want to make a move, I think the Bears roster is pretty secure for their wide receiving targets leading into 2026. But if you kind of look at a snapshot of 2025, it wasn't really anything to write home about. I mean, shoot, to start the year, Zacchaeus was beating him in targets and snaps to start out the year. He was kind of looking like a rookie bust for sure. But if you kind of fast forward to after week 10, he never had less than 5 targets per game. He also got 7 targets in both of their playoff uh, games in the wild card and divisional round. Again, yeah, it wasn't really anything flashy. He was ranging between 8 to 9 fantasy points per game, but you kind of he had a very crowded wide receiver room, with Moore himself, Adunze. Um, you got Loveland in there too. And then, a lot of it is that offense. I think part of it, why Zacchaeus was getting those targets is Ben Johnson does a good job of moving his wide receivers around, and not just, pretty much on a pre-snap basis where you could pretty much have to learn the whole offense, play on the inside and outside. Vernon's more of a slot player. But if you fast forward to today, post DJ Moore trade with him being gone, it's really now just Burden, Adunze, and Loveland really competing for targets. You're not really, he's not really learning the offense anymore. He's got a year into the system. And if you also kind of reflect on the Ben Johnson offense as well, think about Amon-Ra St. Brown, how well he did. He has spent the bulk of his career, St. Brown, as a slot position and being successful there. So I actually think heading into 2026 that Luther Burden can demand more target share than a Dunze playing on the outside. I know they got to kind of do both in that offense, but I think he's about to blow up. And finishing at a PPR rank of 48 last year, you might have some owners out there that maybe were a little frustrated with Burden. They might not be looking at all these details for him to really take that year two leap that many wide receivers do. So my call out today was Luther Burden.
Luther Burden's always going to have a special place in my heart for what he did for me in Week 17 up in the championship weekend. Last season, I'm sitting there making a flex decision between him and Ricky Pearsall. They're actually playing against each other on that Sunday Night Football game. It was the 49ers and the Bears. That was a back-and-forth game where defense was very much optional. Neither team could stop each other, which is awesome for fantasy. It was a really fun game to watch, and Bird went for 8 for 138, a touchdown. That decision ended up contributing to my victory in the championship that week. So I'll always have, like I said, always have a special place in my heart for Luther Burden. But, I think, honestly, I agree with everything that you said. I think this just might come down to, is the horse already out of the barn on this one here? Like, do people, I think people know Burden's story by now, but I do agree that if there's any type of discount to be had and buying Burden, if you think he can outproduce this ranking, which he very well could. I mean, he's only quote unquote only WR 21 after half a season of production, but it's the way he finished the season, the fact that DJ Moore is gone, and just how watching him down the stretch, he was a completely different player at the end of the year. They're starting to scheme a lot of things for him. That's just how dynamic he is. He had a lot of that in his college tape as well, where he could essentially just get the ball in his hands and make people miss. And it's what he's good at. So it's what Ben Johnson was able to do with him down the stretch and in the playoffs. If that continues throughout, pace that over a 17-game season, he could be a lot higher down the stretch here, for sure. And brought a comment up here. So traded away 112 in Pearsall for Burden and a third. I like that.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, that came from one of our Instagram Live followers right now, and I also recognize him on our Discord. So, definitely, I do like that trade as well. I think you're kind of trading away, Pearsall, where it's Pearsall has talent, but I think you're kind of getting ahead of the curve where the usage you're going to get out of Burden compared to Pearsall in the San Francisco offense. So yeah, definitely like that move as well.
Yeah, me too. I'm keeping the light on for Pearsall, to be clear. Like, I do think there's a chance that he rebounds and just needs to stay healthy. I mean, all the guys in San Francisco at every position have health ailments. So I do still like Pearsall, but this is a good move, especially in this year's class where it's definitely an upgrade from Burden to Pearsall. And then once you get past like 109 or so, 108, 109 in this class, it gets pretty murky pretty fast. So I do like the idea of using a late first this year, slapping it onto Pearsall and just grabbing Burden to, even get a little bit younger too in the process. So that's a good move. I like that one as well.
That's true. I always forget those rookie ages, but I know you don't there, Kamish, with Pearsall's older.
I always know
older age.
Sorry. Pearsall was an older prospect too. He was 24 in his first season in the league, so he's already coming up on his age 26 season. Plenty of time for him to rebound, but it does have to start to happen ideally in 2026. But moving on here to our next player. I'm going to go to the running back position here, Chuba Hubbard. And I know Hubbard's coming off a down 2024 season, so if you invested in him last year and he bit you, don't boo and hiss too loudly. Just stick with me here. Let me make the case for our guy Hubbard having a bounce back 2025 campaign. He missed 2 games last season with a calf strain. He openly admitted after the season that it lingered upon his return, affected him throughout the duration of the year. That injury very much opened the door for Rico Dowdle to flourish in the middle of the season for a stretch of games. Dowdle, of course, as we know, has moved on, signing with Pittsburgh Steelers. And this offseason, they haven't done a whole heck of a lot to really replace him. The backfield currently consists of Hubbard at the top, followed by Jonathan Brooks, A.J. Dillon, and Trevor Etienne. I look at Dillon and Etienne firmly as kind of just depth bodies that round out an NFL roster, maybe some special teams utility with Etienne. But outside of that, if you want to look at Brooks as the biggest threat to Hubbard, I think he probably is among this group. I mean, we know he had that second ACL injury within a year. It's limited him to just 12 career touches in his career through 2 seasons. So I do think they want to get him involved more this season. But I think it's a long shot at best to say that he goes out there and just usurps Hubbard altogether as the leader in this backfield. And I think people are kind of just forgetting how good Hubbard was in 2024. He had over 1,300 yards from scrimmage, 11 total touchdowns. He had a PFF rushing grade of 86.3, and he graded out overall as PFF's ninth rated running back of that season, finishing RB12 on a points per game basis. So couple all that with the fact that, like I just said about this class not being crazy deep, it's not any shallower than it is in any spot except for, other than running back. Like that's the lowest I guess the shallowest pool of any position in this draft is what I'm trying to say. And that, by the time they pick 19 in the first round, Jeremiah Love's going to be long gone. So there's no one else in this class that I would point to and say, oh, if they draft this guy on day 2, then he's automatically going to be the starter over Hubbard from day 1. I just don't think that player exists in this year's class. So he's a player that if I'm in a win now position in any of my dynasty leagues, I'm going out of my way to at least kick the tires on Hubbard if I need some running back help and say, hopefully maybe capitalize on a manager who's down on him after a tough season in 2025. I think there's brighter days on the horizon as soon as early this coming season for Chuba Hubbard.
Yeah, I love this call as well. I mean, I think this is also just outside the box fantasy football thinking here, where he is coming off of a year where a little injury plagued, but he also had Dowdle kind of shine over him. But it does make a lot of sense where he recovering from injury, the giving Dowdle a little bit more play time, and Dowdle was also crushing it too. But definitely love this call out. I agree with you where I don't suspect the Panthers really starting anyone over Hubbard either out of the class, and then just looking at their depth. I think they have just guys that they're probably betting they have enough stock with Brooks where they're kind of hoping he can fill in take some snaps in the backfield. But yeah, I love a bounce back here for Chuba, and he's got to be relatively cheap. I'm not sure if the whole fantasy community is shares the same viewpoint of him, but I think there's so many facts in front of us to say he's starter. You got a ascending offense that starting to hit stride a little bit more in Carolina as well. So I think there's a lot of good things, and I think it's just a very smart fantasy play to trade for Chuba if you can get him cheaply. Definitely like that call.
Yeah, good stuff. I mean, like you said, Dowdle was good in this offense too. I mean, if more of that work shifts back to Hubbard as the main ball carrier, I think it's only going to be good things for him from a fantasy standpoint. Bryce Young did take a step in year. I believe that was his 3rd season. He did look a little bit better, a little more confident out there. But I think anytime Bryce Young is your quarterback, you're going to want to rely on the run game, and I think Hubbard's going to be the benefactor of that in 2026. But I know you got one more guy that you want to bring up tonight here. We're going to the tight end position. So talk to me about some TJ Hawkinson. I'm gonna need some convincing on this one, to be honest with you. But by all means, tell the people why TJ Hawkinson is a player you want to buy before the NFL draft.
Yeah, here's another one where I don't believe Minnesota's going to make a splash at this position. I think TJ's still going to be the starter. But if you just look at his fantasy stock, he has been slow, pretty much dropping the last 2 seasons. He's been injury plagued. He's been recovering from injury as well. So on his per game basis drop. But if you kind of look at, he kind of missed his time in 2024 with Darnold having such a great year. That was his injury year, right? And then he returns to horrible quarterback play in Minnesota, also babysitting his recovering injury too, right? So didn't really have, he didn't really have a lot going for him the last 2 years. I get it, but sometimes you do gotta, maybe take a chance on grabbing guys as they're declining. He's still only 28 years old. And I will say that Kyler Murray should be a quarterback upgrade from McCarthy. I think, many quarterbacks in the league last year would have been an upgrade judging by McCarthy's play. And, just sort of a fantasy reminder is he's been a top 5 tight end, top 5, 3, the first, actually 3 years, three of his 7 years. If you take his 2 injury years away, just call that 3 out of 5. I know injuries are a real thing in NFL, but I do think he can bounce back. He still has years left in his career, right? So I do think he can get back, get right back on the horse and kind of turn his career around. He needs it this year, right? But I think 2 years removed from an injury, still 28 years old. I'd like to take a shot at TJ Hawkinson. Um, so that's just kind of where I'm at with it. I know he was viewed as like a top five tight end a couple years ago, but I think he can kind of get back to making a name for himself again.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I mean, I think the price point of Dynasty tight end 22 is about right. I don't necessarily have an issue of there. So if you want to buy him at cost, I'm tentatively okay with it, but I really need to know what exactly that cost is. So it comes down to, of course, the price point of what the player is going to cost, and what you're paying to get him on your teams. I just look at him, I guess, and say, I guess I'll back up one step. I should start by saying that I'm actually pretty low on Kyler Murray, and I know I'm one of the only people saying this, but I think Kyler is actually a sell high right now at this point in the offseason, where a lot of people kind of view him as a buy low. I'm actually selling the news with him and seeing like okay, yeah, Kevin O'Connell, good weapons, awesome. Like I'm getting rid of Kyler. So I guess a trickle down to that is me being lower on Hawkinson, because I think it's pretty clear he's going to be third in the pecking order behind Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. Now, is there enough left over for Hawkinson to be productive? Maybe. We'll see. But I just can't get out of the back of my head where it took Kyler Murray getting out of Arizona to fully unlock Trey McBride and his touchdown equity. You remember a few years ago, it was kind of like a running joke every week. It was like, oh, is this the week that Trey McBride's going to score? Is this the week he's going to get in the end zone? Is this the week he's going to do it? I mean, McBride in his 2 full seasons with Kyler Murray as a starting quarterback only scored a total of 5 touchdowns over 2 years. And then, of course, Kyler moves on, and then Hawkinson – then McBride rather just goes nuts scoring touchdowns and having a tight end one overall season and all that. So it's just kind of a few factors stacking up on it. I guess I don't hate the call given how cheap the price is on Hawkinson, but I'm not really in a hurry to go get him unless he's super, super cheap. Maybe I'll have a little more interest in like a tight end premium league, but I got to be honest, I'm going to be pretty tepid on Hawkinson going forward.
Yeah, I definitely get the reservation. I mean, even if you're maybe looking for a depth piece, someone you fill in, or if you're worried about injuries, he might not be your every week starter. But he can get back in the top 10 is kind of what I'm thinking. I think I do. It is you're almost gambling on 2 players, right? You're gambling on Hawkinson to return, and you're gambling that Murray can fit into the offense. Murray kind of needs more of a motivational coach. Gannon wasn't it in Arizona too. So, I mean, I think, you saw the Kyler Murray years. That was exciting, dynamic. Hopefully it can light a spark in Murray's play, which will then trickle down to the Hawkinson. But, the biggest thing I'm looking at is Hawkinson has proven himself, 3 years, as a top 5 tight end. But I think, the biggest thing is, okay, once he's fully recovered, look at a guy like Javonte Williams, too, where, some of those leg injuries, they take time to get back to 100%. So that's what I'm hoping and betting on. But yeah, we'll definitely see. But I think he's cheap enough where it might be worth the risk is kind of my viewpoint of it.
All right, well, we'll see what that one pans out here. But we're going to stick with the tight end position here with this last player, folks. I'm going to go Isaiah Likely, who's currently tight end 12. So it's already ranked right in the back end of the TE1s in Dynasty. And I just think he's a prime example of a player who's given us production in spurts, but his kind of left managers also wanting a little bit more. And between being stuck in another run-heavy offense and playing in a timeshare with Mark Andrews, we haven't really seen Likely get the receiving volume that he's needed to be a consistent fantasy producer. But changing teams, I think, may very well give him that opportunity. Lands it with the New York Giants, and I think he slots in behind only Malik Neighbors in the pecking order. I look at the departure of Wan'Dale Robinson as a big one, at least when it comes to the available targets. Robinson saw a sneaky 140 targets a season ago, of which Robinson's average depth of target, or his ADOT, was just 8.5 yards, which was good for 78th among wide receivers, according to Player Profiler. And to me, that kind of ties in nicely with Likely, who's a season ago was 7.9 yards, which you kind of just think like, okay, now this is your new short area target for these checkdowns. Now, up to the 140 targets that are now quote unquote vacated, a lot of those are going to go to Malik Neighbors, who missed almost the entire season last year. So I'm not naive enough to think that Likely's just going to walk into this, 140 plus targets out of the gate from the tight end position in New York. So that's not going to happen. But I think there's plenty of opportunity for him to fill that role that Robinson left behind in the offense. So I just look at it too, and I think like worst case, I try to think of the draft and how it's coming up and how it could change the situation. And the worst case scenario here is if they went crazy and took Kenyon Sadiq. This is a different argument, but I think the worst case scenario from a feasible standpoint is if they go ahead and draft like Carnell Tate. I think that would be perceived to be a very bad thing for Isaiah Likely. And while I don't think it's ideal from a target splitting standpoint, I just look at Tate and Likely as two very, very, very different types of players, other than the fact they play different positions. Likely played on last season at 56% of his snaps in the slot, despite being a tight end, and he also played another 28% in line. So those are lining up a spot in the field where Carnell Tate does not line up. I mean, Tate played 90% of his snaps out wide at Ohio State last year. He's projected as an outside wide receiver at the next level. So no matter where he ends up, that's probably where he's going to be. So I think there's a world where guys like Neighbors, Tate, and Likely can all coexist and have good games. And again, that's worst case scenario we're talking about here. So I really like Likely's essentially lining up as a slot player more than half the time. He did that for Coach John Harbaugh, which is his current coach now, again in New York. Kind of took his show with him on the road to go to the Giants. So I think that even if the quote-unquote nightmare scenario of Tate landing with the Giants unfolds, I do think there's still going to be enough left over for Isaiah Likely where he can pay off kind of on that fringe tight end 1, tight end 2 borderline. And if they don't end up going, receiver or another tight end in the draft, I do think that the upside is even higher for Likely entering 2026.
Yeah, I think it's almost, it's got fantasy managers like wonder what Isaiah Likely can do in 2026. Like we've seen his talents on the field. And it's also kind of odd, right? I mean, you got one where he hasn't finished too high in a season, but yeah, he's been buried, behind Mark Andrews. But he, there's a lot of great things pointing his direction. I think, I don't necessarily view Neighbors as that much of a threat because I think he's going to get his no matter what, and that's kind of how it sort of goes with most teams in the league these days. If you got a true number 1 wide receiver, I think it was interesting what you were saying to see what direction they go in the draft and what kind of prototype, even if they get another wide receiver in the draft, high capital, what kind of prototype wide receiver is it? Is it another X? Is it a slot wide receiver? If it's a little guy or a slot wide receiver, maybe they might be competing more targets because those type of guys cover the tight ends and the slot wide receivers, right? I think it'd be great if they get a bigger body wide receiver, and then then you got Jackson Dart, can kind of do more dump offs to Likely. So I think that's when his stock will really take off. So yeah, I think it's be important to see what they do in the draft. But I do think he's very protected. I think everybody's excited to see what he can do with the Giants offense. But yeah, I think that one of the biggest departures of Wan'Dale Robinson on the Giants team, where he demanded so many targets the last 2 years as well. I think, yeah, he's pretty much going to be number 2 in the pecking order as of right now, pre-draft. And depending the prototype, he could actually keep that number 2 role. Not to mention how big of a red zone threat he is as well. So he's got a lot of touchdown upside as well in the offense.
Yeah, he does have touchdown upside, and I'm a believer in the Giants offense. I'm a believer in Jackson Dart. I liked him from day one when I started scouting him a year ago. I was really happy to see him get first round capital. Really happy to see him play well for a stretch. I mean, he has obviously got to protect himself, and he's got to just maybe not run into the line 10 times a game. Be a little bit smarter out there. But if a veteran coach like Harbaugh can kind of harness him, reel him in a little bit, get him to play a little bit more on schedule, I think it could be a benefit. It would be a benefit to the team. I think Likely could be a benefactor of that as well. It's kind of just becoming the tight end 1 finally on his own team, getting out of Mark Andrews' shadow, and hopefully he can produce at the level that Mark Andrews was producing for several years before he kind of take a little bit of a TJ Hawkinson-esque dip and didn't produce quite as well. But yeah, that's a fun rundown there. Just a handful of players that you should be buying before the NFL draft, which is coming up here in just about 3 weeks. By the time we'll be listening to this, so there's going to be a lot to unpack after the draft for sure. But we're doing some more rookie content in the coming weeks, and we'll throw out some bold draft predictions. I think next week though we are going to stick with the veterans. I think we're going to do the sell high candidates, essentially the opposite of what this show was. So if you want to check that all of our other content and all the content to come, make sure you're hitting that like and subscribe button. Make sure you're following us on all of our social media platforms. Again, Sunday Surefire podcast. And until next time, folks, peace.